Okay, we're jumping around a little bit. So we talked a little bit about Elon and Mars and space, but let me jump back to a few questions that folks had. I have to kind of bring up some debunking stuff because I think not the actual idea, not the actual facts of the debunking, but the nature of the true believers versus the debunkers hurts my heart a little bit because people are just talking past each other. But let me kind of bring it up. Mick West. I've just recently started paying attention just in preparing to talk to you about this world. And Mick West is one of the better known people who kind of makes a career out of trying to debunk. Sort of his natural approach to all situations is that of a skeptic. I think it's very useful and powerful, especially for me coming from a scientific perspective, to take the approach he does. It's valuable, and I think no matter what, I hope that people, quote unquote, true believers, are a little bit more open minded to the work of Mick West. I think it's quite useful and brilliant work. So let me ask, he has a bunch of videos, a bunch of ideas where he kind of suggests possible other explanations of the things that were out there. He has some explanations of the things that you've seen with the Tic Tac, like with your own eyes. Like he says that it's possible that you miscalculated the size and the distance of the thing and so on when you were flying around. I don't find that as, I mean, maybe you can comment on that.
No, let me do it right now.
Sure.
So, because that comes up. Like, how did you know it was about 40 feet long? I go, okay, so 16 years flying against other airplanes, know what stuff looks like. You know, I've looked down on things. So if I know, I know, here's the known things. I know when we saw the Tic Tac, I was at 20,000 feet-ish, right around there. So when I look down, I know what a Hornet looks like looking down on them because I've done it for all those years. I mean, I got a good idea. So that's why I said 40 feet, because it's about Hornet size. So, and as I go around, you get to the point where you have to be able to judge distance when we fly out of experience. And you can tell if something's small or big, so I would argue the fact of, pure experience. There's, professional observers, which is what we're actually trained to do. And having done it for so long, no, it was, and everyone came back with the same thing. They're like, yeah, it was about the size of a Hornet.
From a human factors perspective, how often in your experience of those 16 years do you find that what you see is the incorrect state of things? So like how often do you make mistakes with vision?
You make vision issues a lot because and the sad part is your brain believes what your eyes see. We are actually trained to do the opposite of that, especially when you instrument fly, because your brain and eyes can tell you one thing, but you got to trust your instruments. Let's go back to landing at night. So your eyes.
How do you do that? Yeah, land at
your
night.
Your eyes assume that the runway, and your brain assumes that the runway is fixed, but you know that the runway is moving. So if I try and do stuff visually, you die every time. Well, not every time, but you die close to every time trying to land on a boat. So we actually use instruments which are counter to your brain. So, and there's actually all kinds of things that we go through in training. They have this thing, I think they still use it. It's called the MSDD, multi-spatial disorientation device, or the spin and puke. It looks like a giant carousel, and you're in these little modules. Awesome. And when you get out, you think the thing goes really fast, and you can make yourself think that I'm descending or climbing, but you're actually only going around in circles at a very slow rate, as fast as a human can talk. But as they spin you around in the little sub thing and slow it down and speed it up, your body does this. And and then by visuals of showing you, like, they can spin it sideways to the outside wall, but they can show like lines they can make the line stand still because they're moving the same velocity. They can move the other way and you'll think you're screaming. You see it in amusement parks all the time. You do all that because it gives you a sense of but you're really not doing, you're sitting there. So we get trained on all that stuff. So if you want to look at it and go, well, you're disoriented or this, I'd argue going, no, I'm not, because when I'm flying the airplane, even as I'm looking at the Tic Tac, I've got a heads up display that tells me what my airplane's doing. Mm-hmm. So I know what I'm doing. I can look outside. I've got a sense of what I'm doing, but I'm also looking inside to cross-check of what I'm seeing is in reality what I'm doing.
So your brain gotten good at combining, almost adding extrasensory information.
You have to.
You have like supervision. So you're combining what you're seeing, and adjusting what the sensors, what you call the instruments, are giving you, and that in turn it's a loop that adjusts the perception system that adjusts your brain's interpretation of what you're seeing.
Yeah, you'd be amazed at how good. So here's another example. So if we go out over the water, so there's no land in sight, and we're going to fight. So when we fight, two airplanes, we're going to dogfight. As an instructor, and I was for most of my time, you have to come back and you have to recreate it. So we call it drawing arrows. So you have to recreate that stuff. So you get pretty good at going, like I would take off and say, all right, we're starting heading due east. And I know where the sun is at, because in this short couple minutes that we're going to fight, the sun's really not going to move much. It's going to be in a relative. So now I know that the sun is at, let's just say 195 degrees, right? So I'm starting going east, and it's actually be down off my right-hand side. So now I know as I'm fighting, because in the water, you don't have any reference. Like, oh, I passed land. No, you don't. And you can't use clouds because clouds do move. But you got to come back because you go, here's where I started. And then as soon as you end, you go, all right, I ended heading 355. And then you recreate the turns and the amount of turns and use the sun relative. So you can create this entire battle that went on with arrows so that you can come back and debrief the guy that you were teaching on exactly what happened. And you get really, really good at that. So when you come up and go, well, Dave, how do you know you were at 6 o'clock and you went around and you came up here? I go, because I'm trained to do all that. And I take all the notes. Why I'm flying, you can do it. But usually it's you memorize it all. And you get done, and then you as soon as you're done, you knock it off, you look at the other airplane, you get set, and you start writing all your notes down.
Yeah.
And you're writing it really fast on your card, and you go out with a stack of cards, and you stick the new one on your kneeboard card, so you're ready to go, and here's the next setup.
It's in some way similar to what like at the highest level chess players do. I mean, they recap the games, but the richness of the representation that they use in remembering like how the game's evolved. It's not like it's much richer than the actual moves. It's like a bunch of patterns that are hard to put into words, like all the richness of thinking they have about the way the game evolved. It's more like instinctual from years and years of experience. So they try to put it into words, but they really can't. It's just...
No, I understand that. It's because for us, if we don't come back with anything, then there's no learning to be had.
Right.
Because the whole thing is the debrief, when we get back and we talk about it, that's really where the learning is. And it's the same thing if you want to go back to chess. When you start off, you try and learn because you're remembering what you're doing. If you play against someone, I'm always a big play with someone better than you. That's how you learn. If you're constantly beating people, you're not learning anything. You're just learning that they're not good and you're better. When you challenge yourself against someone that is better than you, you learn. So I learned how to fight an airplane with, he's actually one of my best friends. We'll call him Tom. I won't give his call sign because he wasn't. So Tom took me out and taught me how to fight because Tom had just left Top Gun. He was the training officer at Top Gun, so that's the guy. Yeah. The training officer is the main guy at Top Gun. So Tom was the training officer at Top Gun. So Tom, when I learned, because I had come out of A6 and we really don't fight because it was a bomber. So I get in F-18s and I want to learn how to fight because it's a whole other side of the mission. It's the F and F fighter attack. The FA-18 is fighter attack. So I had to learn how to fight. So now I got one of the best fighter pilots in the world who's going to teach me how to do it. And he did. And I would do something and then he would go, I'd get to a situation where I had never been. And then I would go, well, I'm going to do this. And then he would destroy me and he would come back and go, here's why you don't do that. Mm-hmm. And then I would take that knowledge and I would put it in my little basket of tricks. And over time, because no one walks out into that world, I don't care how gifted of an aviator, and go, I am the man or the woman. I am it. Yeah. No, it's a learning process.
And so over all those years, you've gotten good. So, I mean, so what are the chances that your eyes betrayed you when you saw the Tic Tac? Low.
0.
Well, I mean, I'm not 0. So
okay, 90. Yeah, I am 99.9%. So 0.1%. My eyes deceive me. But remember, if it deceived me, it had to deceive the other 4 people. So the percentage is even lower.
Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. I don't find that the particular debunking case that useful, but I'm glad you put it. You said those words out loud. So for me, from my perspective, coming into this world and looking at it, I'm a little bit more skeptical. So your eye account, I think, is the most fascinating story, and that I think that's inspiring to me and should be inspiring to a lot of scientists out there. It should, on so many levels, just like we said, on the engineering level, that maybe there's propulsion systems where we can actually build it, can do some crazy, amazing stuff. So it's at the very least intriguing and at the best inspiring. I just want to say that. But on the video side, it's like it's the videos for the FLIR video, the Go Fast,
And
and the gimbal video, they are only interesting to me in the context of your story. Like without that, they're kind of low resolution. It's like it's easier to build a debunking story to be skeptical. So that's just where I'm coming from. Maybe you can convince me otherwise. But so to bring up Mick West one more time, he looks at the FLIR video and he says that one of the most amazing video parts of the FLIR video, for people who haven't seen it, is at the end of it, the Tic Tac flies or appears to fly very quickly to the left
off the screen.
Mm-hmm. And what Mick West says is that Mick West, probably others, that the way to explain that is the tracking system. Like we said, it's vision-based tracking simply loses the object. The tracking loses it, and so it simply allows the object to float off screen because it's no longer tracking it. So I find that at least a plausible explanation of that video. Looking at your face, you do not. So can you maybe comment to that debunking
Sure,
aspect?
I will. So it's funny how people can extrapolate stuff who've never operated the system.
No, for sure. And
that's like me going, because I'm a big Formula One fan. That's like me going, oh my God, Lewis, what were you doing? You could have done this with the car and you'd have won the race.
Right.
And Lewis Hamilton right now is, defending world champion 2-time. He's 4 or 5-time world champion. But that would be pretty stupid of me to try and tell Lewis Hamilton how to drive a car.
Yeah.
Or as a matter of fact, anyone driving a Formula One car. So I can't tell you how many times I've watched. You got to remember when we looked at this thing, when Chad came back with the video, we sat there and watched it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I watched it off the original tapes going, all right, let's look at this. Because you can look and see where the airplane's going. You can see if it's looking left or right. And if you actually watch all that stuff, it doesn't do that. It actually, when the vehicle starts to move, the bars, the tracking gate starts to open up, and the people at Raytheon could probably add to this because they built the pod. The tracking gate will start to open up. But the thing, when it leaves so fast off the screen, the pod can't move fast enough. It has gimbal rates on how fast that thing can move around. Because there's another theory that, the pod's looking forward. When the pod passes underneath the airplane, so if I'm looking at you and you pass underneath me, the ball will actually flip around to kind of finish off, and it swaps ends because it has, it's a gimbal. It can't just, it's not free floating. But there's a theory on one of them, it's here and it flipped over. It doesn't do that when it's looking out in front. It stays like this. So yet another debunker who doesn't know this. So, and Mick has had several theories on some of the other videos, like one of them, the Go Fast as a bird. And Jeremy Corbell actually did a nice job of saying, no, it's not, because he's on black hot. So the white object is actually colder than the ocean that's flying. Well, birds aren't colder than the ocean. They'd be dead.
So the gimbal video, to comment on the amazing aspect of that video, is the rotation, the apparent rotation of the object. That is something that is not possible to do with systems that we know of. And Mick West suggests that a flare, like reflections or whatever, can explain.
No, because what Mick West doesn't see is, so when they take, because I've talked to one of them actually I work with, so I know him. I talk to him all the time. So, and it's his best friend actually shot the video. One of his best friends.
For the gimbal video.
The gimbal video, both of them. The Go Fast and the gimbal were shot by the same person.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they were in each other's wedding. So that's how well they know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, What you don't see is, so the airplanes they're flying, still Super Hornets, but they have the APG-79, which is the new phased array radar that's made by Raytheon. Thing's incredible. Okay. It doesn't usually, if it's out there and it sees it, it's real. So at first they thought they were ghost tracks when they started seeing stuff, and then they actually threw one of the targeting pods out there. Well, the targeting pod, if there's a heat signature and you go, hey, dot heat signature, something's there. Yeah. It's real. It's not, you're not picking up some extraneous thing. So what you see in the gimbal video of the thing, and it rotates, and you go, holy shit, look at that thing. It's just sitting there, and it's in the wind, and it's going against the wind. Why it's doing this. Mm-hmm. You know, someone goes, oh, it's an airplane. No, if an airplane does this, it's eventually going to start to change aspect because it's in a turn. Mm-hmm. This thing doesn't change aspect. It just rotates.
It's just rotating.
Right. The other thing that you see when you talk to them is, so they're on their radar, there's an object that they identify as their number one priority, or their launch and steering. So when they designate that, that's where the targeting pod's going to look. That's what you get in the gimbal video. There's 5 other, I think it's 5. They're kind of in a V, you know, like a geese would fly, that are out in front of it, and they're actually coming, they're out in front of it, and they actually turn on the radar and go the other way while they're filming the gimbal video. Mm-hmm. Which it's, I know Ryan has come out and talked about it, but when you see it, you go, you know, if you take it in context, because you go, oh, it's just the video. Well, if you take the video with the radar going, no, there's actually other things out there, because there's at least 60 people that have seen these things on radar off the vacapes. It actually became, I called a buddy of mine who was running the wing at the time, the fighter wing. I said, dude, what are you guys doing about this? He goes, well, we got a NOTAM out, which is a notice to airmen, which means there's these objects out there in the warning area. So anyone, you can fly a Cessna through the warning area. It's all the warning area tells you is that there's high military traffic and training out here. It's probably best not to be here, but there's nothing that prohibits you from going in there. So these things have the right, wherever they're from or whatever they are, you know, because people are like, oh, they're balloons. Well, balloons float. Balloons don't sit in 70 knots of wind and stay in the same location. They had an airplane, because there was 2. There's the gimbal thing. That's a pretty big object. Mm-hmm. There's also, they talk about, it looks like a cube that's inside of a sphere.
A translucent sphere. What the hell is that?
And so I've heard, they almost hit one.
It's almost hit them. So that's one of the biggest, another biggest account is like almost hit a plane. Something that appeared to be a cube in a translucent sphere. What do you make of that?
Again, you know,
what I mean, that's the most dangerous.
You're right.
Thing.
The biggest frustration is when you do that and you go, okay, so this thing passed between 2 airplanes, and I think it was within like 100 feet or something like that of the airplane, and almost hit it. So what they do is they come back and go, hey, I had a near midair. What'd you have a near midair with? Well, this floating beach ball with this cube inside of it, and you go, huh?
Oh man.
You know, so they send out a NOTAM again, and they do what's called a hazard report that says, hey, there's these objects out there. We almost hit one, you know, and that gets sent off to the Naval Safety Center. What was done? I mean, what are you going to do? You can catch one, go out with a giant net and try and bag one. You don't know, because they've seen them. They've picked them up like hovering on radar, and then all of a sudden they're traveling at really high rates of speed. So, you know,
what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?